studying the universe is that it always surprises me. Even recently, I was thinking about the distribution of mass in the universe, and I blew my own mind. One of the things we like to talk about in astronomy is space and how big space is and how everything is mostly space, including ourselves. And the reason why we say that is because we're made of atoms, and the mass of atoms is concentrated in its nucleus primarily. And these nuclei are a few 100,000 times their own part away from each other. So as an example, if I am 2 meters tall, that means that the nearest human to me would be about 200 kilometers away from me if humans were distributed the same way that the mass in our bodies is. So if humans were all 2 kilometers apart from each other, clearly that distribution is all mostly space. And when we look at stars, it gets even worse because stars are a few million times their own size apart from each other. Now, going from the atoms a few 100,000 times their own size apart from each other to stars a few millions to tens of millions of times their own size from each other, what about when we go to galaxies? Galaxies are composed of hundreds of billions of stars. How far apart would you guess the galaxies are in terms of their own size? Trillions of times their own size apart? Well, the answer is really surprising. The Andromeda galaxy, the nearest large galaxy to us, is only about 20 times the size of the Milky Way away from the Milky Way. So they're only about 10 times their own size apart from each other. So the universe is denser than we are. And when you think about the universe that way, it's really mind-blowing. This dense array of trillions of galaxies that's even denser than trillions of atoms in your arm. That is so mind-blowing to me. My story, like everyone else, starts with my parents. And since I am a scientist and education has been a big part of my success, you think my parents were probably highly educated, but nothing can be further from the truth. Neither graduated high school. My mother dropped out of school when she was 16 and pregnant with my older sister. My father dropped out of school when he was 9 years old, and he was illiterate into his mid to late 20s. But they had me, and things were pretty stable for the first 4 years of my life, but then my parents divorced and things went haywire. We moved every year. My mom took us from state to state, and when I was in Los Angeles, I was hanging out with my cousins who were members of the Crips gang, and they later ended up going to prison for bank robbery. When I was in New Orleans, I was reunited with my father, and my father had his own large business, and he'd be really tickled now to know that in many states, particularly Western states, his business that was illegal at the time is now legal. And my father actually trained me in his business, and I started working with him at the age of 9. So that was a big part of my early education. I say that my education with my family, in many ways, was crime school. At around the age of 11, I moved away from my father again with my mother traveling. And at this point in my life, she would leave me with different families and different friends. So in a 16-month period, I actually lived in 9 different households and attended 5 different schools in 3 states. And these were some of the roughest neighborhoods in the nation. South Central Los Angeles, Houston South Park and 3rd Ward, New Orleans 9th Ward and New Orleans East, and finally rural Mississippi. And so at the end of that period of my life, I was a changed person. And I realized that in order to be safe, I needed to be the aggressor. I needed to intimidate the next guy before he intimidates me. And that started me down a dark path in my life that I didn't get out of for a very long time. Across my life, there were people that came into my life that helped me to achieve the next level. And then there were just lucky accidents. For example, when I was 10 years old, I was left at home alone a lot. And by that time, I had developed a love for reading, primarily because my mother loved to read books. There weren't many books in our home, but there was a set of World Book encyclopedias. And so I decided that I was going to read the encyclopedias from A to Z. However, I did not complete the mission because when I hit E, I had to skip all the rest and jump to R. And the reason why is because I ran into this gentleman named Albert Einstein and his theory of relativity. So relativity really blew my mind. I was really into all the weird things that people talked about, but what made relativity so different from all the other weird things like ghosts, the Loch Ness Monster, the Yeti, was the fact that this was how the universe really works and it was set down in mathematics. Now, I didn't understand the mathematics at the age of 10, but I said to myself, I'm going to learn this math. And that's exactly what I set about doing for the next several years. And lo and behold, when I was in high school, this new invention comes around called the personal computer. My girlfriend bought her family a TRS-80 my junior year in high school. And that same year, teachers, or rather professors from a nearby university, came to my high school and told us about this event known as the Science Fair. And we decided to participate. And I ended up deciding that I was going to program special relativity. And that's what I did. And I ended up winning first place in the Mississippi State Science Fair. Now, that did not mean that I was on my way to becoming a physicist. And the reason why is because I was so undereducated. I grew up in rural Mississippi, and among Mississippi schools, my school was one of the poorest academically performing schools. So instead of going to college, I went away to the Navy. I spent a short amount of time in the Navy, but what was really lucky for me is that I was educated much more strongly in mathematics than I had been prior to going to the Navy. I learned algebra, and this set me up for college. I went to college. It wasn't easy for me. I was a struggler. I dropped out at one time, and my life of crime got even much worse. And when I realized it was a do or die situation for me, I switched things up. Even though my life started off in a place that was unlikely to land me where I am today, by hook and by crook and the help of a lot of people, I found myself in the graduate physics program at Stanford University, ultimately achieving a PhD in physics. And you may be aware of my work. When you see these pictures of the sun with all the plasma loops, I was on the team that did that first. The team was led by the late, great Dr. Arthur Walker. He was also the PhD advisor for our first female astronaut, Sally Ride. And from there, I went to Silicon Valley, where I got several patents really quickly. So my technologies are in your computer chips. And that was just the beginning. But what I love most about my career is not the discovery or the invention, and there's been a lot of that, but really how I've been able to help others. Being an educator also allows one to be a mentor. It allows one to be a consultant and an advisor. And so I've gone all around our nation, worked with our national agencies from defense to the Department of Energy to NASA to the National Science Foundation to the State Department and all around the world to help people achieve their own life goals and dreams through the pathways of education, and particularly through science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This has been a difficult year for people worldwide, and I know that you all have faced challenges as well as I have. Those who've been affected directly by this pandemic have been affected the most, clearly, and my heart goes out to everyone who lost someone or themselves are currently suffering. But in terms of business, there's also been a big impact, and people in the meeting planning area, people in hospitality, they've been really affected. And the thing about us human beings is that at times of stress and challenge, we rise to the level. We rise up and we persevere and we do better even more so. And my own personal life story sort of reflects on this idea. So I can't wait to share my story with you because I think that there's something to be taken away for everyone. You could be going through the struggle, or you could be someone who just might be able to lend that word or that access that helps the next person to achieve their goals. And so I just can't wait till November where I can share my story and my challenges with you. And maybe you can see a bit of yourself in there and some of the lessons I learned of overcoming these challenges and not only surviving, but thriving.